welcome to the next installment of ArcSight Flex Connector training. In this particular episode, we're going to do a very simple one. We're going to do basic token value Flex Connector. This is probably one of the easiest to do because we're basically able to avoid using regex and anything particularly fancy. So they're very easy to deal with. And the example I'm going to use today is a make-believe Lenovo firewall, and I've picked up some event files from around the traps, and we're going to use that as our guinea pig. So first things first, what we typically do, obviously, as we've done in our previous episodes, is to take a look at the actual firewall logs themselves. So let's have a quick look at them here now. And you'll see they're very nicely tokenized for us already. We've got a little bit of a header here, klogd, nothing important there. But then after that, absolutely everything basically has a token name, then the equal sign, and then an actual value. So this is relatively easy for us and of course the machine to actually parse up. So we use what's called a token value parser for this particular Flex Connector. So we're going to make a connector that basically parses all these, puts in things like, obviously D name will be destination name or target name. You know, things like log type, PRI, they may or may not be important to you. We're just going to grab, for today's example, the stuff that may be important from a security perspective. So things like source address, source port, destination address, destination port, etc., etc. Proto, which is obviously protocol, the policy, and then received and sent. So that might be bytes. Sent and received as well, so that might be quite useful. We could actually use that in a nice little moving average graph in ArcSight. Alright, so the log file itself, straightforward. We'll quit out of there. Now, the key value tokenizer is really the only type of Flex Connector the only real tool you've got available to you is Vi or gedit or Notepad++, whatever your favorite notepad or text file editor is. There's really no nice regex or flex agent wizard to use in this particular case, as you've seen in other episodes of this training series. So we've effectively got to build this from scratch, and fortunately it's really easy. So there's really not a great deal to it. So I've started it off, and before I go into that actual file, I want to point out that you remember in the past that when you've got a regex file reader, you've got the name of the file, then you've got SDKR file reader .properties, and when you actually build out the configuration file, you basically just give it the first part of it, and the connector framework will do the name suffix for you. So when you look at my Lenovo version, you'll see lenovo.sdk key value file reader instead. So in other words, the Flex Connector framework is going to know that this is actually a key token or key value pair tokenizer rather than a regex one. So this is important. So I basically create that file, and we'll go into the file itself. And if you look in the actual Flex Connector guide, you'll see an actual example of it. Okay, scrolling down here, key value parsers. So about page 38 of the Flex Connector guide. So this does a pretty good job of explaining it as well. And these are the fields you need to place into the actual configuration file itself. So that's all I've done. I've copied and pasted all of these, and in most cases they're going to be the same. So a key delimiter, for example, is basically how key value pairs are separated, and in our case it's going to be the space or a space, as you can see here in the example. The key value delimiter is going to be, well, what separates the key from the value itself, and in our case it's going to be the equal sign. Regular expression to capture a key. you can use this. I typically don't. I'm deliberately saving the regular expression stuff for the next tutorial, which will cover extra processes and regular expressions against key value tokens. So I'm going to leave that one out for now. A text qualifier, whether we want to trim the messages, trim the tokens and the key, so basically removing leading and ending white space. So back to the configuration file. You'll see that I've literally just copy and pasted this stuff. Key delimiter, space, value delimiter is just the equals sign, regex is this, and obviously this is basically just saying anything that's not an actual white space. Text qualifier, we're going to trim the messages, tokens and the keys. Now the only thing you need to do now is think about how many tokens there's going to be, and I always put a sample piece of log file in the actual file itself. I find it very, very useful to just read that event as we're going along. So in this case, this is really, really easy. We're not interested in klog. We're not particularly interested in dev ID. Let's start from the date. The date stamp is obviously going to become our end time in Ceph format. So that's probably the most important thing we need to think about. And then after that, we're going to see, you know, destination name and so forth. So we can make a start on that. So all we're doing here is just like what we do in other Flex connectors, is to start tokenizing this stuff, and in our case it's going to be really, really easy. So in this case, token 0 name equals the date, okay, and oops, date I should say, date. So all it's doing there is grabbing that value there, up there, date. So keep the name of it down here the same as what the actual key is in the actual log event itself. So date. Now obviously that's a date stamp of some description, and it looks to be a pretty standard one, so there's not going to be any real trouble parsing that. We don't have to do anything fancy to it. We obviously need to give it a type, which is obviously going to be a timestamp, as you'll remember from previous episodes. Then we typically need to give it a format as well. And what we're dealing with here is basically 4 numbers, and then, oops, yeah, 4 numbers, escape that, 2 numbers, escape the / again, and then 2 numbers again. Then we're going to have a space. You may want to put in a /s, it's up to you to be more exact. dd dot dd dot dd. Beautiful, that looks about right. So that's our first token. Token 1 dot name equals dname. This is going to be a good one. This is obviously the destination username, that's important. Dot format equals string. Theoretically we don't need to worry about that because it actually defaults to string, so we won't worry about that. Although for completeness we probably should. Let's do things right. Token 2 dot name equals, we're not interested in the log type, don't really care about that to be honest. Pry mod, not really interested in that, let's leave that out. Let's just go straight to SA. Nice part about SA, the source address, is it's already an IP address, so we can give that a token type of IP address straight away. That's handy. Token 3.name equals sport. Obviously its type is going to be an integer. Token 4.name equals DA. Token token 5.name equals dport. Token 5.type equals integer again. Token 6.name equals, we'll grab proto, that's important because we might be able to do some sort of a mapping file later on where we say if proto equals 17 then it becomes TCP, if it's 16 it's UDP, it's 15 ICMP, etc, etc. So that might be quite handy for us, and we'll do that. We could do that with a mapping file, but that's out of scope here, and we'll cover that off in a different episode. Proto token 6.type equals, it's an integer, token 7.name equals policy type equals integer again. Won't worry about durations, it's giving me nothing useful, that's fine. 8.name equals RCVD, received, token 8.type equals integer, token 9.name equals sent, I think it was. Scroll off the screen. Just check that that's correct. Source domain, destination domain, doesn't seem to be anything in there anyway. Firewall log equals 0. Let's not worry about those for now. I think we get the idea. So we're picking up the events that the event tokens that we want. But remember that if you suddenly went back to, let's say the PRI field, and you wanted to add that back in, obviously you need to go back and put that in later on. It might be a pain. Sometimes it's easier just to tokenize everything straight up and then filter it out later on. So completely up to you. Token count is obviously going to be 0 to 9, so that's 10 tokens I've got here. So we update the token count here. Now if you get the token count wrong, in terms of if you say there's 9 tokens as opposed to the real 10, you're simply just not going to parse token 9 down the bottom here. It'll just never make it into the event. So you won't see an error for that. It just won't appear. So be wary of that one. So that is basically our delimited file done from a tokenization perspective. Now we simply need to go in and put in all the stuff like the mappings, the device vendor and device product and so forth. So it's really quite easy what we're doing here. I'm going to cheat a little bit so we're not all sitting here watching me type this stuff forever and a day. So what I'll do is I'll simply cut and paste it from a previous section, and we'll go through that now. So as you remember, device vendor, string constant Lenovo, device product, string constant firewall, beautiful. Destination username is going to be dname because we're referencing the token name or the field name itself. Same thing goes for SA, S-port and so forth. And remember, source address equals SA. I've already typed it to an IP address. If I left it as an integer or a long or something like that, we'd need to either cast it or we're going to get an error. So make sure that your event field types match when you start mapping them to event.fields. Otherwise, you're going to get errors all over the place. So we've got protocol, destination port, etc., etc. Received and sent. I'm not going to worry about that now. I might come back and get that later on. Obviously, this is the purpose of it is to make sure that we've got the main stuff that we need for this particular use case. So pretty happy with that. That's basically a complete file. So I'm going to write that out. We're finished with that one now. Now what I've done here in terms of my connector, it's actually a Flex Agent multi-file reader. So what it's going to do is basically look for files in this particular directory, opt ArcSight connectors Lenovo logs, and you'll see my text file is here. So that's great, no problems. There's no need for me to do anything here. So if I just cat those now, you'll see my events. If I go back to my agent.properties file, you will see that I'm dealing with a file type that I need to update. Lenovo, just leave it as Lenovo, that's all you need to do. And then this one simply needs to be SDK value token. So I'll just grab the correct name from here so I don't misspell it. SDK key value file reader. Now the reason why I'm showing you this is it's really important because the Flex Connector framework is going to be looking for Lenovo.SDK value key value file reader .properties file in the Flex Agent directory. Now if I was to leave that as SDKR file reader, it would be looking for Lenovo.SDKR file reader .properties, in which case it would be expecting to do some regex parsing. Secondly, it's not going to find that file name, so it's going to error out straight away. So that's why we need to update that. And if we scroll down a little bit further on, where's our actual log file folder? Opt ArcSight connectors Lenovo logs, great, which we've just seen. Now we can basically the mode options if we don't want to. Typically, what will happen is once a file is processed, it will have the word.process placed on the end of it. Oops. What I want to do is start at end equals false. In other words, I want you to go to the start of the file. Otherwise, we're going to have to keep appending lines to our sample log file to get it to actually do anything. So that's important as well. I always change that to false while I'm testing. Once it's finished and working, I typically switch that off to true. So we're good with that. There's our agent.properties file. We can basically give that a run now to see what happens. Let's, as we've done in the past, let's grep for error in agent.log. See if there's any huge errors. And ArcSight agents, as we've always done in the past. Let's see how this goes. It may or may not work. The log files will be our friend and tell us what's actually going on here. So we start up the connector framework. Go back over to the log, unable to get connector service name, that's fine, no big deal, we'll leave that. Okay, so what have we got here? Right, that's actually failed to process the file, unsupported parser type. Right, so it's time to just start doing a little bit of debugging, and that's fine. Alright, so as you saw there's a number of, it's not parsing for us at the moment. So if we go back to our console, we're getting nothing but the actual ordered events, start up, start down, and so forth. So clearly there's a problem, and we need to go and find out what it is. Now, the only fatal or error that I can find is unsupported parser type. This is a good indication that the Flex Connector framework can't understand what type of parsing that I want to do. So in other words, there's a good chance that I haven't filled out my agent.properties file correctly. So I'm going to go and check that out first. And Lenovo, it's finding the file just fine. It's finding the right directory and so forth. But the actual config type, so the parser type, SDK value file key reader. Now I think I can see what the problem is. It's SDK key value. So in other words, I got myself 1K short here. Add that K in, write that file out, make sure I've actually got a copy of the log files there. Yep, good. I'll grep that for errors again. Well, actually, I might do fatals this time. Let's see if that makes a difference, because there was clearly a spelling error there, which would definitely be confusing the processor. So let's try that again, see what happens. See if we avoid that actual error this time. So far so good. So far so good here. At the moment we're looking pretty clean, which is nice. On the console itself we're not seeing any errors pop up whatsoever, which is nice. We can pop back over here and just see what's happening on the console. Nothing yet, that's fine. See if we've got anything in terms of error. Alright, so again, there doesn't seem to be any major problems. Alright, so let's just make sure that we've got event files there ready to go. Yep, we do. Fantastic. We're tailing our agent.log file, looking for errors. Great. Let's have a look. Now let's do another run. Do a run. Now I'm just running this off my laptop, so it can take a minute for events to process and so forth. But we'll sit here and watch the console for a little bit, see what happens. No problems so far, there's no errors, nothing that we need to worry about. This is a very good sign. What you see here, first event from Lenovo firewall received. That's another good one to actually grep against, or tail and grep against, if you see that for this particular parser anyway. That's a really good sign that you are getting events correctly parsed. Come across here to agent.log tail. No, still nothing there, so I think we're pretty good. If we have a look in Lenovo.logs, you'll see that my text file is now .processed. Great. So it's actually processed it and not simply moved it into the bad folder. If this folder was empty, that's another indication that we're not parsing correctly. So if we come back into the console, you'll see fantastic. We've got attacker and target, and we've got Lenovo and firewall and so forth. So things are looking pretty good. So we can add something like our target. Now remember, destination username becomes target username in ESM, so we'll add that. Sure enough, we've got our target username. Fantastic. We've pretty much got everything there. But if you look closely, you'll see that there's still a big problem. Our manager receipt time is still the same as our end time. So that, sorry, I should say our end time is the same as the manager receipt time. So in other words, it hasn't parsed it at all. We've got to think of a way as to why that's actually occurred. So the end time should be the time stamp that we found in the actual event file. So there's clearly a problem there. So we can go back, and because it's happening just a few seconds before the manager receipt time, we can see that that's clearly a case of, yep, I've processed it. I haven't got a value, so I'm just going to stick in the current time, which is of course a few seconds behind when the actual manager will receive it. Great. So let's have a look as to what might be causing that error. There's no errors actually popping up in the parsing process, so what could it actually be? I think the cause of the problem is probably pretty darn obvious. We're tokenizing it, date, it's timestamp. We know we've got our regex correct in there because it's not erroring out, it's not ignoring it. And a good way to debug that is if you can't do the regex off the top of your head. I mean, a timestamp's a relatively easy piece of regex, but you could just throw this event file into the ArcSight regex tool and get it to generate the regex for you and simply compare, or maybe even just copy and paste, and that'll do the same thing for you. So that's a good cheating way of doing it. So I got a funny suspicion that we're not actually mapping the end time to the actual file, to the actual event itself. We've got destination username and the source information and the protocol. So here we go. There's the problem. We don't have event.end time being mapped to the actual date, and that should fix our problem. Right, so let's just make sure we've got some log files here. So what we'll do is we'll move them to unprocessed, basically, so we can get the connector to actually parse them again. We'll bomb that out and we'll run it. We'll run the agent again. Clear that screen so it's nice and clear. And let's have a quick look at that. So we'll run the connector again. We'll just wait for it to crank up. It takes a minute. And we see, interesting, we've got ourselves an exception. Okay. But we've also got our first event received. Alright, that's cool. Let's go to the tailing the log. No errors. Interesting. Not sure what that might be. That could actually be maybe extra lines in the file, perhaps. But let's go and have a look at our actual console and see what's coming up there. Interesting. Here we go. You'll see here that the time is being parsed, but it doesn't look particularly good. So we're going to have to make some changes to our regex more than likely. It looks as if it's not reading the date and or timing correctly. So let's have a quick look at that. Scroll back up to the top here. Great. You'll see there that my whole mistake is in fact that I've put in regex when I don't actually need to. Alright, so this is a really good point. There's no need to actually regex tokenize this timestamp. It's already done for us. So in actual fact, let me just close the connector down first. And what I can do is get rid of that regex. It's good that we've done it because it will become important later on. And what we can actually do is just put in an actual format. You'll find help on that in the actual Flex Connector Dev Guide again. So you can receipt time, and you can basically format the date time itself in that fashion. So what we'll do here is we'll put in a year, month, day, space. That's going to be hours, minutes, seconds. Right. So that's a much easier way of doing it. There's no need to do fancy regex. In fact, as you saw, it errored out anyway. So save that. Let's just get some events available to us, and let's rerun that connector and we'll see what happens, because you remember what happened here. We weren't parsing the time and so forth correctly. Right, let's run that again and see what happens. So it's good that we've had a few problems along the way. Even though key token values are typically the easiest to do, it's quite interesting that we actually found quite a number of problems along the way. Spelling errors, parsing errors, doing things in the wrong way. It will all lead to either incomplete parsing, and you'll get interesting results in the console, or no parsing whatsoever, and it just bombs out completely on you. So it's good to see some of this stuff in there. Alright, so let's have a look back in the console, and that looks a whole lot better. We've got ourselves a because we haven't formatted it to actually show us the year. That's why you don't see an actual year on this, by the way. And we're also sorting and viewing via manager receipt time, even though this date is well in the past. This is why we're actually still seeing them in the console. So that's great. So at this stage, we've pretty much got everything. So we could actually just double click on one of those events, and let's just have a quick look through the actual event itself. We've got a lot of good stuff in there. The device vendor, the products. Obviously, the ArcSight engine is putting in the country of origin and the latitude, longitude, and so forth using the country mapping module. We've got a destination username. We've got destination port in there. Everything seems to be pretty good. So that is one complete key value tokenizer Flex Connector done. In the next section, what we're going to do is we're going to shake things up a little bit. What you saw in this one was a beautifully well tokenized event file. Everything was made dead easy for us. There was no tricks or anything that we needed to take care of, no misaligned or misformatted text. But in the next section, we're actually going to start to mess with these event files and make them harder to read, make them basically impossible to read by the key token parser. And this is what we call extra processors. So some really extra powerful stuff that will go into the next section. So thank you very much for watching. I hope you got a lot out of it. If you've got any questions or queries, please don't hesitate to send me an email. Thank you very much.